invite the International Union of Superiors General, the Catholic organization representing around 600,000 sisters and nuns and religious around the world, to lead us in a spiritual moment.
Good morning, and welcome to this moment of spiritual grounding, prepared by the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Commission of the Union of Superiors General and the International Union of Superiors General under the theme, Raising Hope Through the Laudato Si goals. I invite each one of us at this moment to take a deep breath to reach the center where the Creator God dwells in you, so that you can connect with this Creator God who created out of love, for love, and in love. Laudato Si goals invite us to move from prayer and reflection to action for earth and the poor. Rooted in prayer, we are moved to concrete actions, hearing the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, and working together for the transformation of our common home. Creator God, we come before you with grateful hearts, aware that our common home cries out for healing and care. Our sisters and brothers long for justice. You call us through the 7 Laudato Si goals to live our faith in action, compassion, solidarity, and love. For the cry of the earth, open our eyes to protect creation. For the cry of the poor, open our hearts to walk with those who suffer. For ecological economics, guide us to choose what builds dignity and care. For sustainable lifestyles, teach us to live simply so that others may live. For ecological education, form our minds and hearts to see and feel. Creation as gift and responsibility and not as profit. For ecological spirituality, deepen our faith to find you in all things. For community resilience and empowerment, unite us to act together in hope.
Response to the cry of the earth and cry of the poor. A sense of deep communion with the rest of nature cannot be real if our hearts lack tenderness, compassion, and concern for our fellow human beings. The suffering of the earth and the poor are intertwined. Compassion for one strengthens care for the other. Responding with tenderness and courage makes us witnesses of hope. How can I listen deeply to the cry of the earth and cry of the poor in my daily life and choices and respond?
Ecological economics. Authentic development includes efforts to bring about an integral improvement in the quality of human life. A just economy values life, people, and the planet above profit, promoting balance, fairness, and sustainability rooted in gospel values and principles. What concrete changes can I make in my life and community to support and economic and serve life rather than greed and profit?
Ecological education. God has written a precious book whose letters are the multitude of created things present in the universe. Teaching and modeling care for creation shapes hearts and minds, planting seeds of ecological responsibility and hope across communities. How can I nurture ecological awareness and hope in myself and in those around me?
When we can see God reflected in all that exists, our hearts are moved to praise the Lord for all His creatures and to worship Him in union with them. Seeing God in creation awakens awe, gratitude, and belonging, making our care for the earth a spiritual act of hope. Where do I experience God in creation? And how does it inspire hope in me?
Community resilience and empowerment. The urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change. Working together strengthens our impact. Collective action for creation fosters justice, peace, and integrity of creation and lasting hope for all. How can I contribute to building resilient, empowered communities for the care of the common home?
Adoption of sustainable lifestyle. A constant flood of new consumer goods can baffle the heart and prevent us from cherishing each thing and each moment. Small, mindful choices, what and how we buy, eat, and travel, create hope and demonstrate a joyful commitment to care for creation. What small steps can I take today to live sustainably and inspire hope for future generations.
Lord of life, make our commitments specific, our actions measurable, our efforts achievable, our mission relevant, and our response timely. For the earth and the poor cannot wait. Bless this time of reflection and action. May it transform our hearts and our world. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
What an amazing way to start our day. So I feel that we are now feel recharged to begin. So thank you for leading us in this amazing moment. And now, please join us in welcome His Eminence Cardinal Jaime Spengler, the President of the National Conference of Bishops of Brazil and President of the Latin American Episcopal Council and Archbishop of Porto Alegre. His tireless commitment to social and environmental justice, inspired by Laudato Si, inspire us to act boldly for our planet. So please, a round of applause to Cardinal Jaime. Bem-vindo. Bem-vindo. So, 10 minutos pra gente. A lot of Portuguese speakers, right?
Buenos dias. Good morning. Guten Morgen. Boker Tov. Bonjour. Bom dia. Al celebrare il 10º anniversario della enciclica Laudato Si dell'Accordo di Parigi,
Celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, I raise a voice which is not only mine,
latino-americanos e
but the
caribenhos
voice of Latin American people
e las mártires de la tierra, de comunidades ribeirinhas, indígenas, afrodescendentes, campesinas e urbanas,
okay, that is the indigenous communities, of farmers for whom life is very hard in a context of great threats. And they are, as Pope Francis said, they go ahead by singing so that their fight and their concern for this planet
primeiro ponto.
does not fall into despair, and that they have hope despite of everything. We are in a historical moment of great crisis with wars, climate change, migration, energy, and energy issues. The generation of global heating,
55
problem of global heating is very serious. We reached 55 degrees above the pre-industrial level. So These are unprecedented figures in our human history, and we are getting closer to what the world is doing, which is really collapsing. Several countries adopt a policy of exclusive interest, and they weakened the international dialogue and the multilateral consensus, which is an indispensable condition to guarantee peace in the world and the respect for nature. The climate crisis is not technical, it is existential. It concerns justice and dignity. And we invite the people, all people of goodwill, to take care of life and human relations. As Christian faithful, we believe that evangelizing is to make present the kingdom of God in the world. And our commitment for the common home cannot be separated from justice. So solutions should combine justice and ecology, the rights of nature, and human dignity. And the cry of the peripheries, of those who are forgotten, the cry of the earth, claim for mercy is a claim for justice. God does not forget about his own people, and the church shall not remain silent. The church is called to raise her prophetic voice and to heal the thorn social fabric. Nonetheless, global institutions and multilateral negationism
la urgência de reconstruir la confiança em la cooperación y el diálogo. Como recordó el Papa León, la crisis
necessary, so we have to reconstruct dialogue. As Pope Leo reminded us, ecological crisis is also a crisis of trust. The world will not be saved if nations will not go back to believe in one another and to take up a common responsibility.
Profecia e apelo para cada persona que habita el planeta.
Is a prophecy and an appeal to all those who inhabit the planet. The encyclical that was published 10 years ago is a luminous inheritance of Pope Francis, who enlightened the way of the Church with the priority of integral ecology, and it is an urgent appeal to take care of our common home. His message proposes a radical integral conversion and gives a great strength when it imposes to establish a dialogue between believers and non-believers. Laudato Si taught us to listen to the twofold cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. But this prophecy was not listened to with the urgency that was needed.
Resposta adequada del mundo motivó la publicación.
This lack for adequate responses has motivated the publication of the exhortation Laudate Deum that reproposes the radicalism of Laudato Si in the context of extreme phenomena of climate change. And it tells us that the world is getting closer to a no-return point. Pope Francis said that the Synod for Amazonic region is a child of Laudato Si. In fact, the Amazonia is a test for the whole humanity and for the mission of the Church.
L'anno passato soffriò
because the region, in the region where I live, last year we had the consequences of a terrible natural disaster. So there were so many deaths, so much destruction, a great tragedy indeed.
La Amazônia como prueba decisiva para a humanidade.
Amazon is a decisive test for humankind, because Amazon is the green heart of the planet, the place where the destiny of humankind is decided, because more than 1/10 of biodiversity on the earth can be found in our tropical forests that are the guardians of the carbon system. It's 14 billion trees give a decisive contribution to regulate the climate all over the world. But not only our forests. Amazon is also rivers, sources. It is the greatest strategic reservoir of fresh water that gives life to millions of people. Among its water flows, there is 1/5 of the fresh water on the planet, which of course supports life and nourishment and nourishes all of us. Amidst all this richness, the indigenous people in the millennia lived harmoniously with nature, and it was so effective in order to guard the ecosystem. The implementation of COP30 in Brazil in November this year in Amazon represents a historical call so that the Church can reaffirm its prophetic condition, and it is an imperative to defend Amazon and the other places to fight against deforestation and wildfires in order and get to the goal of deforestation zero until 2030. Then we have to continue to bet on multilateralism.
La Iglesia cree que el camino hacia la COP30 es
Because
una
the Church believes that there is a
movilización
great opportunity for popular re-education, mobilization, awareness, new proposals, claims to defend the lifestyle of peoples. The history of climate can be transformed starting from the local level, guaranteeing the right to the possess of the land and to defend the plan of life of the communities who live in the countryside, in the forests, and defending water and cities. Multilateralism can be built from the grassroots in a time of crisis of multilateralism of the powerful, and that is why we have promoted meetings, alliances, and studies in the university.
Política através de
And
las
we
conferências
commit ourselves
América Latina
for a political representation in Africa, in Latin America, in the Caribbean region.
con ocasión
And
de la
we launched a joint message for COP30 with a call for an appeal for climate justice of the common home, because without climate justice there cannot be peace, and without an ecological conversion there cannot be any future.
maioria de los países del mundo aún
And
não
most
hayan
countries in the world, it is very serious that the majority of countries in the world did not introduce their contributions to
que
the
marcam
UN.
la trayectoria de los
And
próximos 5
these
años
climate plans that will characterize the next 5 years call for seriousness, for urgency, and a radical commitment, especially for the
soluciones
polluting countries. We cannot
iglesias del sur
advance false solutions, propose false solutions. They were rejected by all the global south. We condemn the financialization of nature, a technocracy, such as in case of a carbon market, and also they transfer the task of diminishing emissions, especially on the peoples that suffer the most of these consequences. And this appeal for climate justice exists because the rich nations recognize
e
and
aportem
accept and assume their social debt by financing the climate in a right and effective way without
demanda
creating more
la
debt.
eliminación progresiva de los combustibles fósiles y
We
rechaza
ask for the elimination of fossil fuels and the rejection of any further exploration or infrastructure dedicated for fossil fuel in order to reach 1.5 degrees. We propose a radical transformation towards models for degrowth that give priority to the well-being of people and can ensure sustainable conditions of life. The Church commits herself to consolidate resistance and resilience of the communities and to promote a historical coalition between players of the north and the players of the south of the planet. We have to establish a mechanism of climate co-governance with the active and binding participation of all communities. Now, my last
la fuerza de los pueblos originarios y la
the
alianza
strength of original peoples and the alliance with the church. So I want to conclude by giving honor to the spiritual strength and to the commitment of original traditional people, which are the real guardians of all the land. Pope Francis recognized that when these peoples remains in their own land, they are those who can take care of it in the best possible way. To defend these peoples means to defend the life, the life of these territories. And territories themselves are the theological place where faith is lived. And that is the subject for the liberation of God. The International Synod for Amazon reminded the value of social dialogue to which we are called to participate all together. If we want to have a dialogue, we have to begin with the last ones, because they are the main interlocutors from whom we have to learn, first of all, so we have to listen to them out of a right for justice. We have to ask them permission in order to introduce our proposals. And this dialogue is not easy at all. It does not express only cultural differences, but especially a colonial wound that created asymmetric relations that are there still now. And this requires for a deep listening and a spiritual contact with the word, an opening of the heart and the mind. And so we have to learn to dislearn in order to go back to learn. This is a sort of a Pascal pathway to get out of ourselves in order to immerse us into the other, in order to get closer to other nationalities, to other languages, etc. So instead of relativizing faith, this dialogue, on the contrary, challenges us to rediscover the cosmic contemplative dimension of the gospel, disfigured by the utilitarian modern mindset.
Não pode reduzir-se a ajustes.
Solutions to environmental crisis cannot be limited to technical or financial adjustments. We need to integrate a cosmovision, a practice of local people. The Church is called to open herself to dialogue with indigenous spirituality, the spirituality of the Afro-descendants, in order to dismantle the anthropocentrism, the disordered anthropocentrism that harmed so much our creation. Any kind of dialogue is needed, many types of dialogue, but always on the basis of the preferential option for the poor. Always giving the priority to them and to our Mother Earth. So we have to make a covenant for the original peoples, the people of the countryside and the forest in the defense of life and in defense of land cultivation. We have to learn from the ancestral wisdom of good living that inspires Laudato Si in order to achieve a good life, in order to create a society that is free from accumulation and bias. So we have to resist to consumerism and reduce the superfluous. We have to put into practice a real brotherhood and sisterhood. Let us put care for life at the center of our concern, and it is possible to replace this logic with an economy of good and care for the common home. And for this reason,
Seamos semillas
we have to be seeds of a new future. And so we should repeat this together. We are seeds of a new future. Let's repeat it together. We are seeds.
Podemos. Deseamos. Seamos.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cardinal Jaime Spengler, for your prophetic voice. Not just voice, but also actions. I think it's fair to say that the work that the Brazilian Bishops' Conference and CELAN, the Latin American Episcopal Conference, has been doing is a huge example for all of us. And also based on what Cardinal Jaime just shared, there is a very small sentence in Laudato Deo when Pope Francis finished. For me, that's one of the most powerful words, and that's like a huge message for us. And he just finished the apostolic exhortation saying, "Praise God" is the title of the letter. For when human beings claim to take God's place, they become their own worst enemies. So, thank you so much for bringing this voice, and we keep our way. If I'm not the first fan, I'm sure that I'm the top 5. And now we have Mark Clay to play some piano so we can just have a breathe and also reflect on Cardinal Jaime's words. Yeah, he's coming. I think so. Very good, very powerful. I think we can skip.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. The piece I'm going to play is a prayer for the planet Earth, and it is a rearrangement of Bach and Salati, and it reflects the past and the present. So I've taken the composers and I've rewritten them to fit today's environment. And I hope that this resonates with everyone.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was beautiful. So now I invite our next panel, Faith and Climate Justice, the Impact of Laudato Si within the Faiths, to kindly come up on stage while I introduce our moderator, Mr. Austin Ivory. So everybody can come on up. Let's welcome them. So if you can't see because we have our melting iceberg, we invite you to not be shy. You can stand up and move. We want you to be comfortable and to be able to experience the conference as best as you're able. So you can take a moment, don't be shy, you can stand up, no judgment. All right, so Mr. Austin Ivory is a renowned journalist, commentator, and author, best known for his insightful books on and with Pope Francis, including The Great Reformer and Wounded Shepherd. His deep understanding of papal teachings and the Church's role in global issues makes him the ideal guide for today's conversation on harnessing hope amid crisis. Austin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christina. It's good to be with you. Good morning. I'm delighted to lead this session now on the impact of Laudato Si on our faith communities after 10 years. We heard yesterday from Pope Leo and from Governor Schwarzenegger and others about the importance of the heart. When I was working with Pope Francis on a little book which came out in 2020 called Let Us Dream, Soñemos Juntos in Spanish, I asked him, where did Laudato Si, where did it come from? Where was it born? And he said very simply, it came from my heart. And he then explained how...
Okay, she came up to me for the announcement now.
How the feeling grew and that he recognized that feeling as being of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And in a sense, he wrote Laudato Si to open the hearts of the whole world to that same Spirit. And I'm an example of that impact because after Laudato Si came out, I found myself drawn to have a relationship with the created world which I felt I was missing. I wanted to be rooted much more in creation in the land. And to cut a long story short, I now live on a farm in the west of England. It's a small farm of 6 hectares where we are trying to create a resilient, sustainable, regenerative kind of ecosystem and indeed on a small scale, agriculture, hospitable to wildlife, but also which feeds us and others well. And I've learnt what it means to say much more than the land belongs to me, that I belong now to the land. It's changed me. And my little farm has got me thinking about the way that faith communities might run such projects to enable people to enter into the experience of the relationship with creation, which is key to the transformation of the heart. So Laudato Si makes a powerful case for ecological conversion, a turning back to a deeper belonging, to a different way of relating. But how does the church and other faith communities, together with other faith communities, offer people a chance to experience that encounter? That's the question I have in my mind and I brought with me to this place. How do we enable encounter and enable people to reflect on it? And I'm part of a small group, some of them are here, called Loving Our Land, who are exploring integral agroecology as might be used by our churches. And this is as much faith work, of course, core faith work, as care for migrants or peacemaking or defense of life at all stages. As Francis reminds us in Laudato Si, how we relate to creation is of a piece with how we treat each other. How do we learn to see our fellow creatures, human and non-human? Do we see them as raw material to be exploited, there for our benefit, or a gift to be reverenced? So, after 10 years, a lot is happening, and it's the joy of this meeting to discover that. And it's wonderful to bring it all together. But we also know that while Laudato Si catalyzed conversion, We are still in the early days of that transformation. Most people in our faith communities do not see it as core or essential to the witness that we give. And there is little urgency often from our own faith leaders. Many of them have a wonderful leadership and they're here today, but many do not. So how can our projects not just witness, but win over? How do we captivate? What concrete initiatives and witness can we embrace? And I'm delighted to answer that question to have with me 4 brilliant experts from all across the world in many, many different areas. Immediately here on my left is Priyanka Lalla. She's from Trinidad and Tobago. She's a youth advocate with UNICEF. She's the author of a brilliant little series of books for children called Svara's Ocean Adventures, which allows children to enter into what is happening to our oceans. We have also Alistair Dutton to my right. He is like me, from the UK, but he's based mostly in Rome. He's Secretary General of Caritas Internationalis, the global Catholic humanitarian arm of the church, which attends, of course, all across the world, in every corner of the world, to both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. We have also Dr. Ayad Abu Mogli. He's also a global leader, originally from Jordan. He's the founder and director of the Faith for Earth initiative of the UN's Environment Programme. Essentially, he is an expert on encouraging interfaith collaboration to heal the planet. And finally, on my far right is Bishop Martin Hayes. He's the Irish Bishop's champion for Laudato Si, overseeing, among other things, their call, their radical historical call for 1/3 of church grounds to return to nature by 2023. Brilliant pledge of the sort we hope to get more of in these days. So we have to move a little bit quickly. I'm going to be a bit strict with my panel. They've got 4 minutes each. I'm going to ask them each a question. They're going to answer, and then we're going to move through 3 questions, and then we're going to come to take a few questions also. So the first question, let's begin by taking stock of the journey since 2015 of the last 10 years. And Priyanka, I'm going to turn to you first, because the last of that should be the first, the youngest first. You're the face of the future. You're just 19 now, and so you were 9 years old when Laudato Si came out. How has its message shaped your own journey as an advocate and teacher?
Thank you so much. Testing. Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you so much for that question, and members of Laudato Si, delegates, my colleagues, it's a pleasure to join you today. And my journey is certainly one of courage and hope. My advocacy journey began at the age of 10 in 2017 after Hurricanes Irma and Maria hit the Leeward Islands. I saw the devastation and the destruction on television. I saw the immense amounts of plastic pollution that had washed ashore. I saw entire communities destroyed. And what stood out to me the most were the interviews of young children my age, recounting how they had lost their school books and school uniforms, how they could no longer return to the education system because their school communities had been destroyed and their playgrounds had been destroyed. And to me, this was a huge turning point in my advocacy career. And I saw myself within these children, and I felt an innate response to act, and I felt a massive responsibility to react to this crisis. And although there was pain and devastation and destruction, my immediate response was hope, and a hope for my future and my region's future, and an innate response to protect my Twin Island Republic. So I created a solution called the Zero Waste Lunch Kit Initiative and the Zero Waste blog, where I thought that if I could even inspire one of my peers at school or some young person in my community to change their habits to be more sustainable, this would be enough. So I started blogging and talking about how we can be zero waste, how we can cut out plastic from our lives, how we can be more sustainable, and how this could have a ripple effect throughout our region and work towards a green economy and a circular economy. And after this, I started working with UNICEF, and my message has always remained to be one of hope, one to inspire young people to embrace the challenge, to empower us, to want to fight for our future, and to want to work together and prioritize our solidarity and intergenerational collaboration. And through my work with UNICEF, I've worked on many issues related to climate and health, climate and children's rights protection, education, health and safety. And through this, I learned that the climate crisis is not just an environmental issue, but it is a human rights crisis and a child rights crisis. And in a way, this gave me hope, because if it was a human rights and a child rights issue, then hopefully somehow that we as humans would see an innate response to act for our future, to act for our safety. But I realized that this was not the case, and there was a huge gap. And this became even more clear to me when I did a focus group when I was about 15, and I did it with students my age, around 200 students, and I asked them the simple question: do you believe that you have the power to create meaningful change and adapt and mitigate to the climate crisis? And 98% of the students said no, they do not have the power. And these were students who were well educated on the issue of climate change. And to me, this was a stark realization, and I knew that something needed to be done. So that's why I created my children's book series, the Svara's Adventures series. So far, I have 3 books: Svara's Ocean Adventures, Svara's Mangrove Adventures, and Svara's Rainforest Adventures. It's based on my 10-year-old little sister, and it recounts her going into these ecosystems and exploring what's happening there, the urgency of the crisis, but more importantly, how we can empower young children and young readers to want to act, to feel inspired to engage their communities, to engage their own lives and their own households, to work towards meaningful, simple actions towards sustainability. And through this education, I realized that hope is not only a belief or a system that we can use, but it's a tool that we need to utilize to empower young people. And we can utilize it in such simple ways, where we work with our young people in our education systems, through our faith communities, and we use hope to inspire and to empower, and we use hope as a form of leadership. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Priyanka. So, Alistair, if I could turn to you, perhaps you, more than anyone, you see today on the ground how interconnected is poverty and climate change. How deep, in your view, is the awareness of that connection now in the church, would you say, 10 years on from Laudato Si? And feel free to be honest.
Thank you, Austin. And good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be up with everybody here and able to talk to you this morning. I think one thing to remember about Laudato Si is it's not solely an environmental encyclical. And Pope Francis gave us a great gift in emphasizing the interconnectedness, which is at the very heart of what it is to be human. So as we affirm, every time we say our Lord's Prayer, we say, on earth, hear the imminent as it is in heaven, framed within the transcendent and the imminent. And as our Father, we are all brothers and sisters. We are uniquely and deeply loved by the Father and given infinite dignity and inalienable worth. And so I think the whole encyclical builds from that. I think what he also did, as he took the name Francis, Cardinal Bergoglio, as a former Jesuit, I say it with pride, Cardinal Bergoglio invoked a whole spirituality of the environment. In taking the tradition of St. Francis and the Franciscans, he brought a spirituality into the center of it. He then challenged the denial within the church. And honestly, when I was going around the parishes in Scotland 10 years ago, priests and bishops would say, why on earth is Caritas talking about this? After Laudato Si, I rarely heard that again. And the voices, when they did come, were very quickly hushed, because there was an authority to what Pope Francis had said, an authority in the man and an authority in the body of church teaching. And we saw the thirst for that, not only in the church, but in the world as well. And so that building momentum into the Paris COP in 2015, that thirst for a moral voice that emphasized the connectedness of everything. But most of all, in the poor, you almost heard an audible sigh of being understood. that their reality and the interconnectedness of the environment with their poverty and their reality was now being articulated as teaching for the church. And so when I travel in countries like Ethiopia or Mali, I hear people describing how the climate shocks, their weather patterns are becoming so much more erratic and harsh, so much more extreme, that they used to expect a famine in Ethiopia or a very severe food crisis every 7 years. Now they're coming every 3 years. They used to hold back until after a bad harvest to have children because they knew if the children got to age 5, they would be okay. Now they don't have that luxury. We have farmers who don't know when to plant anymore. They used to know when the rain started, they would plow with the first rains, and then they would sow, and the rains would be reliable, and they would get a harvest. Today, they don't know how secure those rains are when they start, and so they don't really know when to plant, and often the rains don't hold, and the harvest fails. So they're very wise people. They keep back half of the seeds so they don't lose everything. But that means immediately they will only get half a harvest. And so I think that interconnectedness now is broadly understood. The world has welcomed that vision of Pope Francis, but as expressing what we know as the church, and the church is the people. Francis really gave a voice to the people who are feeling it first and worst. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you. Hello? I've lost, thank you. So, Ayad, turning to you next. Now, Francis, of course, took inspiration in Laudato Si from the Orthodox Church. The document for human fraternity he signed with the Muslim world in 2019 begins with a pledge for all people of faith to work together for all creatures and the universe. How do you rate progress in the interfaith world towards this in the last 10 years? Ayad.
Thank you, Austin, and good morning, everybody. Is this working? Let me start by saying that interfaith and faith work on the environment did not start in 2015, but 2015 was a turning point and created what I would call the 10 golden years of faith and interfaith collaboration. And the reason is that Laudato Si instituted what we call the beyond formal law approach to sustainability. You know, we need laws, we need regulations, we need instructions and guidance and so on that are instituted by governments and systems. But without the ethical component, the value-based system integrated into these laws and regulations, they will not work at a scale that we want to. And, you know, the Laudato Si has introduced what we call the whole of society contribution to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the convergence of, you know, when I started my work, the Undersecretary General asked me, what is integrated or integral ecology? I said, it is sustainable development with spirit. So the spiritual component added to the policy and the science is very important. So we've started the concept of the science policy spirituality nexus, which is adding the spiritual component into whatever policies and the scientific evidence that we introduce to the sustainability. And then over these 10 years, you know, there was inspiration to other religions and faiths to do some sort of spiritual soul searching within the religions and faiths. Meaning, how do we reflect on our teachings that we do and how it is related to the environment, as you know, the Catholic Church and Pope Francis did. And that, you know, inspired me to say, well, I mean, to 25 to 30% of population of the world are Christians, and another 25% are Muslims. So altogether, we represent 50% of the global population. And we do have similar aspects of the spirituality, and we do have what we call guiding principles, the commandments of Christianity, the Bible, but also the commandments of Al-Quran. So why should not we follow suit, be inspired, and come up with a similar system for the Islamic nation and of course for the whole world? So Al-Mizan, Covenant for the Earth, was born as inspired by Laudato Si. And that actually also inspired other religions to think about, how their religions are, relevant to whatever contemporary environmental issues. The issue before Laudato Si was, we talked about the environment in abstract, in generality. But there are very specific environmental challenges that we need to address. What does it mean, fossil fuel, from a Christian or Islamic perspective? What does it mean, biodiversity loss, financial, climate finance, justice, inequality, and so on? So that has inspired the work of religions and, of course, us at the United Nations to go deep into contemporary environmental issues and relate them to the teachings of, the religions themselves. So the final point that I want to make is that beyond formal law is becoming an integral part of UNEP. So it did not only inspire, religious interfaith collaboration, but also changes in the systems, the multilateral systems that the UN represents.
Got it. Thank you so much, Ayad. Thank you very much. Please. So, a simple question to Bishop Martin. 10 years on from Laudato Si, how's it going in Ireland?
Thanks very much, first of all, Austin. I'm humbled to be here amongst these experts. I come here speaking really on behalf of Laudato Si Working Group, which is affiliated to the Irish Episcopal Conference. And I suppose, like Alistair, I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, the document itself, Laudato Si, and Pope Francis, and the whole message of interconnectedness, and the following document, Laudato Deum, which was a tap on the wrist, as it were, to all of us to get going, and that we weren't doing enough. I suppose one of the key learnings from me in more recent times, actually, is that Laudato Si is not just a document about, as Alistair said, about the environment. It's actually part of our social teaching. It's part of our theology. It recommends the framework for working into the future. It's important for all of humanity at this time. I suppose when it came out first, I suppose I was working in a parish, and one of the things we found ourselves doing is being part of an eco-spirituality group. Now, that was a totally new phenomena in a parish in Ireland, to be part of a group who are studying the document itself and drawing inspiration from it. These people who are on the ground in Ireland and throughout the world represent people who appreciate the beauty and diversity of creation, as well as an increasing awareness of the harm that is happening, and how our focus in the world on consumerism and economic wealth is to the detriment of nature, and it's exacerbating the poverty gap between rich and poor. I suppose also I'd like to highlight the role of Pope Leo himself, and we heard him here yesterday saying, look, this document is even more relevant today than it was when it was first published. And I just quote maybe just from his message on the 1st of September on the World Day of Creation, Prayer for Creation, highlighting the necessity of prayer, determination, and concrete actions. And he has highlighted how climate change provoked by human activity is growing in intensity and frequency. And I suppose that re-echoes or reaffirms the point that Pope Francis made in Laudato Deum. And in that, he was certainly critical, not slightly, but really critical, of COP gatherings, of what is happening at an international political level. And the other aspect of Pope Leo, again, is his celebration of the Mass for the care of creation. And listening recently to an expert on this area, Professor Stefan Giger, a Dominican, he highlights the scriptural background to that prayer for creation, highlighting, for example, that we're little less than a God, yet when you look at Laudato Deum and you hear, we are not God. So we have to find that balance between the two. I suppose another factor in Ireland would have been our Global Development Agency, Trócaire. They, since 2018, would have acknowledged, look, that climate change is the reason for the increasing poverty gap. And they, through their Lenten resources, would have done their best to highlight to ordinary parishioners that the reason for poverty is, or a strong reason for poverty is the climate change. Also, our own Laudato Si working group, it's affiliated, as I said, to our Episcopal Conference, and it consists of climate scientists, educationalists, Trócaire staff, myself, and Laudato Si activists. And they have been instrumental in, I suppose, in pushing our conference towards taking steps. And one of the steps, I suppose, that we took in recent times was, as with many other conferences throughout the world, is divestment. And with the help of the Laudato Si movement, we've been able to have 13 of our dioceses divest, the conference itself divest, and also a number of educational Catholic institutions, as well as the congregations. And I leave it at that. There are a number of other aspects, and I see Austin there wants to put a hold on me.
Plenty of chance to hear more, because there's a lot happening in the church in Ireland. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bishop Martin. So the next question is about the challenge of collaboration. And here we have on this panel people with real experience of what it means to foster and enable collaboration across groups, across boundaries of many sorts. Alistair, I'm going to come to you first. Caritas Internationalis, of course, knows all about collaboration because you work with and through the local church in a huge variety of cultures and contexts. So, can you share any lessons about what enables or encourages sectors to work together on climate? What helps to overcome resistances and focus energies?
Thanks, Oscar. Maybe I'll concentrate on four things. I think one of the things that has really helped us to come together and be more motivated is that sense of the moral teaching that comes out of Laudato Si, and a sense that we are doing what is right. I think another thing within Laudato Si which brings us together is a common understanding of A, what the problem is, and B, what we can do about it. And I think within Laudato Si, there was a clear articulation of many dimensions of the social and economic problems of the age, and some suggestions as to how we go forward from there and what we can do about it. As Pope Francis said, there aren't two crises, there's one crisis, because it's all interconnected. The third thing, I think, is of building collaboration and building motivation is feeling that you're part of a common endeavor, a sense of communion. And so when we come together around a common purpose, we enter into communion with one another, and where two or more are gathered, God is in our midst. And so there is a sense of a people coming together around a common purpose, understanding what's wrong, a sense of a spirituality for it, and then working out of that and finding people who will join us in that sense of mission. And then the fourth area, I think, which is so important, is knowing that there are things that work, knowing what we can do and that they produce results. And I think we've seen that in our work to challenge the structures that create climate change and make people poorer, in some of the things we've achieved at national levels where we've had legislation come in, some of the achievements we've made at COP. And I would urge us all to concentrate on the things we have achieved, because that will give us the hope for the future. But the last thing I'd say, just on what works, I go right back down to the real grassroots of the church. And that is what the church is. And I have some examples in Ethiopia on a project I've visited 2 or 3 times that we did with Caritas Ethiopia. When I was in Scotland with Caritas Scotland, we did it together with Trocra, together with CAFOD and Catholic Relief Services. And there were 13 valleys that were completely barren. And by a series of small earth dams, we caught all the topsoil as it was being washed off in the rains. By terracing, we caught the rainwater when it fell in the rainy season. And slowly, year after year, the streams in those valleys came back. And so today we have running rivers 12 months of the years. And they irrigate now fields that were not there for the last 30 plus years. And during the war in Tigray, they produced the grain and the vegetables that kept people alive in the town of Mekele, which houses something like 300,000 people now. And that is all because the principles of Laudato Si, I look forward to seeing the Borgo later this afternoon, the principles of Laudato Si and how we apply it really work. We have to hang on to that and keep coming together.
It's a great example. Thank you. Thank you so much. Priyanka, you are a dandelion, meaning that you're part of former Irish President Mary Robinson's women-led project for climate justice. Forgive me. Why does it matter that women in particular collaborate on this, and what can they achieve when they do?
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Hello? Microphone, please. Testing. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for this question. And indeed, it is an honor to be a dandelion and to work with Mrs. Mary Robinson and her incredible team. And to be a dandelion is an incredible opportunity to work with women all around the world. It is a women's empowerment movement for climate justice and looking at how we can equip our women in rural communities, in marginalized communities, in indigenous communities to work towards climate justice and achieve climate justice in their communities. But of course, it also prioritizes feminism and equality, and we work with many great men to make this happen as well. And working with these women throughout these communities, there is an integral and critical role of women in the climate justice movement. Not only are women greatly affected by the climate crisis due to their unique circumstances in their rural communities being on the forefront of climate change, but they are critical for climate adaptation and mitigation and action. Women hold immense amounts of knowledge and power within their communities as homemakers, as the head of the household, having heritage of knowledge and being key players and leaders within their communities, natural leaders. So equipping and empowering our women to have and to embrace these skills, whether it's green skills or capacity building programs or outreach programs, to ensure that they are able to act to adapt to the climate crisis is key in working towards how we adapt to this issue. And there have been so many great examples of how Project Dandelion has done this through working in the agricultural sectors to ensure that women have green skills to plant and grow sustainably, from looking at their education systems, teaching them how to do their daily household tasks in the most sustainable way possible, adapting to the changing precipitation patterns and water level rise near their rivers and their communities. It's all about looking at the whole and looking at the simple processes that are changing within their lives and how they can adapt to it to be most successful and achieve their full potential within their communities. And empowering women means empowering the entire community. When we educate one woman, we educate an entire household, we educate their children, and it's a ripple effect that has long-lasting benefits and something that is critical in moving forward towards climate justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bishop Martin, you have been key to the great pledge that the Irish Church has made, 30% of church land to be returned to nature by 2030. But what's also fascinating about what the church is doing in Ireland is the way you're blending synodality with this ecological conversion. Can you tell us about that?
Okay, so first of all, I suppose about the Return to Nature project, it all began with our knowledge of a COP15 in Montreal, which was on biodiversity, and there that there was a recommendation made that all land and sea may return to nature by 2030. So one of our group, our Laudato Si working group, Father Sean McDonough, a Columban and environmental activist, he would have highlighted this for us, and it ended up that we made a proposal to the Irish bishops to return 30% of church grounds to nature by 2030, and they agreed with that. And since then, we have prepared an amount of resources on our Episcopal website so as to help people, and we held some different webinars. It was picked up in particular and is being picked up throughout the country, in particular in County Clare, in Killaloe Diocese, where one biodiversity officer who are employed by a state organisation called the Irish Heritage Trust. And so they picked that up. 12 to 16 parishes now are involved. It involves also some of the Church of Ireland community. And in the meantime, I would have addressed the National Conference of the Biodiversity Officers, engaged with them and their particular counties. And for example, in my own diocese, 3 of our parishes have engaged now with the biodiversity officers in order to return, as I say, 30% of the grounds to nature. I was recently in a parish in Kilorgan down in Kerry, and where they have fully implemented this, and even in our own diocese, at our own cathedral, we were just recently harvesting some of the wildflowers for seeds for next year. So that's the overall, I suppose, gist of what the plan is about. I suppose I'd like to make the point that in Ireland at the minute and throughout the world, we're engaging with synodality, and much the same as care of creation, as with synodality, there isn't, and maybe this is preempting a question further down the line, there isn't that huge take-up. So I believe that we need to unite what we're about in care of creation with our journey on synodality, because both require a conversion. Now, we know all about the requirement of the ecological conversion from Laudato Si, but looking at the final document coming from the Universal Synod last October 24, there was just a number of elements there that were highlighted. There's highlighting conversion, that it consists of being called through our baptism by the Holy Spirit to be together. We're being called and to conversion because it consists of relationships by reaching out to others. It consists also of the process of making decisions together and of forming new bonds. And in doing all of that, we can arrive at communion, to participation, and being sent on to mission. So I think that we need to consider ecological conversion in that respect. And just reflecting upon what it says about ecological conversion, what Pope Francis says, he was referring to what Pope Benedict had said at a previous time, where he said that our external deserts of the world are our internal deserts. And those external deserts are poverty, hunger, abandonment throughout the world, as well as the desert within ourselves. And that's, as I see it, is the lack of being in touch with God, the source of life within us. Thanks very much.
I think this connection, please. This connection between synodality and ecological conversion, I think, is set to grow. And I know Sister Natalie of the Synod has done some great work on this, and it would be lovely in these 2 days to develop how we can convert the way we treat each other within the church and act together, and the way we relate to nature. Now, Ayad, you're an expert. By the way, he's wearing a dandelion, so there we are. That shows it's not just women. You are an expert, of course, on interfaith collaboration. Your Faith for Earth Coalition brings together business, science, youth, and so on, under the umbrella of faith. So what are the key ingredients, in your view, for this kind of collaboration?
Well, the first thing that we need to understand, and this is what we have started with, is that everybody's talking about the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. But the fact of the matter is that we have an ethical planetary crisis, which is the indifference, apathy, and greed. And if we take it from that perspective, then we can understand what the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has mentioned is that the humans are the source of or the cause of our climate crisis. And why they are the source? Because the consumption patterns, the production patterns, and use of fossil fuel, and so on and so forth. The unsustainable practices for development and the unsustainable development paradigm that we are adopting. So marrying those two crises to support, for the ethical component of it, to support the work on the planetary crisis is very important. The second thing that is important is the vision and the platform. For example, Laudato Si provided the vision. Pope Francis provided the leadership. The creation of the Laudato Si movement, for example, made it happen, made that message pass to the people. Similarly, when we started the Faith for Earth Coalition at UNEP, there was no platform or venue to bring in people who are like-minded, who believe in the role of values and ethics. When we started, we had only 2 faith organizations accredited to the UN or to UNEP. And now, today, we have 90 faith-based organizations that sit on the policy-making table. So they have the right to vote and to discuss decisions and resolutions and introduce the ethical component of the discussions, the policy discussions. And the final point, which I think Schwarzenegger yesterday talked about, is the narrative that you use. And it is not enough to say, well, we're planetary crisis, climate change, and so on. And their narrative here is not only talking about poverty and pollution, but the narrative related to what you believe, to the compassion, the interconnectedness, to equality, to injustice, to all of the values that can be read in the Bible or in the Torah or in the Quran. They are there, but they need somebody, what I call the ethical and literacy towards understanding the connection between environmental issues and the values that are there present for centuries in our books that we believe in.
Thanks so much. There's a wisdom of 10 years or many more years, decades in those 4 minutes. Thank you so much. So look, in this final round, we're going to be, the answers, will be much shorter. Just 2 minutes, please. And we're going to look at a tension which is very present in Laudato Si and very important for this morning's theme, namely the urgency of the task. I know that when they were drafting Laudato Si, they were very aware that they had to communicate urgency, but at the same time, not to overwhelm people with despair. And it's very easy to do that. And the other problem with too much urgency, as it were, you can end up with a feeling of helplessness. So we need to balance or integrate urgency with hope. And hope is the confidence that however small and local our initiative, it matters, and that it will be used in theological terms in God's providence to bring about the change which we may not see. So how do we blend these two, urgency and hope? So I think a deep question with which to end. Who wants to go first? Bishop Martin, maybe.
Okay, thanks very much, Austin. First of all, I would say that in Ireland, and definitely I'm speaking from that perspective, people in parish communities do not fully grasp the urgency of the issue. And part of the resistance is, in Ireland, there's an intensification of farming at local level. Also, there has been a lack of adult faith development. Some of the other obstacles are polarization of the debate and the certain critiques of Laudato Si that are coming out in more recent times. That's more at an international level. I suppose, how can we accelerate? And I suppose I come back to my whole point about synodality and prayer. We're only vaguely aware of God residing in our depths. But when we hear in Laudato Deum words like, the world sings of infinite love, the words of Pope Francis, and he also saying that we don't, while science is useful, we don't bring that scientific view. It doesn't helpful in the long run, because we have to see ourselves from within rather than without, that we are part of creation. We have to act from within that. Now, we resist that tendency because we have a kind of a focus upon being scientists, and sometimes we have this notion as well in the world that we're going to solve this with science. However, the call that I'm, I suppose, issuing there is that by embracing synodality, by embracing in particular the synodal conversation, it's something that we did with our Kilmore Care Creation Group there just in recent times. And beginning in that way, it meant that people were speaking from the heart about the reason they were involved. They were a small group, but when they're speaking from the heart, it gave them the energy, gave them the motivation. And that's what needs to happen, I think, into the future.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Ayad.
Well, I can say that at least from the faith leaders' perspective, they do feel the urgency. And in the many pre-COP, interfaith summits that we have held with them, they have indicated how urgent it is, and they called governments and others to take action. But what lacks is the implementation mechanism of those faith leaders or faith institutions in implementing the urgent action that is needed by everybody, but specifically by faith institutions. And yesterday we talked about the national determined contributions and the idea of people's determined contribution, which is fine, which is great. But what is missing is the faith determined contributions, the institutional commitments of faith institutions. You know, faith institutions own 8% of habitable land on earth. They own 50% of schools and educational systems. They own 45% of health centers and clinics at the global level. They are the fourth largest power. So they do not only have a responsibility, but have the amount that can change things. I mean, when you calculate how much they consume of carbon dioxide as faith organizations, it is a substantive amount, which amounts to, 8% of habitable land is 36 times the size of the United Kingdom. That is sizable, and that is impactful if we do implement the urgency. What we need is to create an accountability system for the commitments and urgency fields of the faith leaders and faith institutions, so we can work together in implementing and making an impact.
It's a fascinating idea that the entire Catholic Church makes a pledge, for example, concrete pledges, what it will do. Alistair, hope and urgency.
Thank you, Austin. As you say, it can be very easy to become overwhelmed with the urgency and the scale of the problem. And as I was listening to the music from our Oceania friends yesterday, we know those island states, the people there currently have the water washing around their feet, and the people of Tuvalu are preparing to move to Australia. So whatever aspect of the climate emergency we're facing, it can seem overwhelming. I think, where do we find hope in that? I think we find it in the things that work. St. Ignatius says, for him it's all about desire, and I think we need to hold on to desire. But he says, if you can't pray for the grace to desire something, pray for the grace to desire it. And we know when it comes to getting things done for climate mitigation, for climate adaptation, in the end it comes down to money, and we don't have the money. So if we can't pray for the outcomes at the moment, let's pray for the money to create the outcomes. And that's why this year when countries are faced with the climate shocks, imposed tariffs, loss of aid budget, and crippling debt. That's why we're calling on everybody in the church to unite around the debt crisis and to turn debt into hope. But my final point is, in truth, there are three things that last: faith, hope, and love. And nothing is ever asked of us that is too great for us. Her and His grace is enough for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Priyanka, you know, you bear on your shoulders, you know, the future, speaking as a young person, urgency and hope. How do you live with those two things?
Absolutely. I have to say, though, for the climate conferences and climate discussions that I have attended in the past, they have been quite secular and not faith-centered. And I think that highlights why the work of Laudato Si and discussions like this is so critical, especially when getting young people involved and working towards that intergenerational collaboration with faith and climate justice at the center. And I think even with my generation and maybe younger generations as well, there is a faith crisis. There is a lack of faith, even in the statistic I showed you, where 98% of students said they did not believe that they had the power to adapt to climate change. There's that lack of faith and that lack of hope. So how do we reimagine climate justice in empowering faith and hope for our young people? We give them things to believe in. We give them opportunities to see a brighter and better future. And faith looks different for every one of us. And for me, faith is believing in something greater than myself, but also believing in myself and believing in my peers, that we can work together in solidarity through intergenerational partnership to work towards the future that we want to see. So I think to our faith leaders in the audience today, and anyone watching, really, how can we engage our young people in our faith systems to work towards the future that we want to see? Because we are the future and we need your support. We need that intergenerational collaboration to get your ideas and your solutions, and to get our ideas and solutions to work together within faith for climate justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, and thank you for your witness on behalf of young people holding our institutions to account. Please carry on doing that now. We're going to move into a Q&A session now. Rather than everybody try to answer every question, I'll read out the question, and whoever wants to answer, jump in, and catch my eye. So we have a question from Lara Kelly, who's joining virtually from Ireland, and the question is, how do we bridge the gap between individual or community actions and systemic change in order to give people the confidence, language, and data to push for social and environmental justice at all levels? Phew, big question. Who wants to take it? Oh, excellent.
Well, I believe that, Laudato Si is a great example of that, which is institutionalizing the individual perception, individual values, and ethical system into a sort of a doctrine, the Laudato Si commandments, or the Laudato Si goals now they have developed, and the Laudato Si action plan. So similarly, what we're trying to do is Al-Mizan, Covenant for the Earth, and the Al-Mizan movement. This is exact institutionalization of the values and behaviors and ethics that we believe in. You put them in a document, but also you establish the mechanisms to support the role of Laudato Si and Al-Mizan in building the capacity, training the people, educating them about their own values that they believe in. And most importantly, what I would like to call for when we talk about Laudato Si, make a special reference to other religions. And that makes the connection and makes, peace and collaboration and coexistence with the people, for the people and for the planet, more powerful to work on.
Thank you so much. Important to keep that in mind. Thank you. Another question is, despite 30 rounds of COP meetings, the climate justice story remains critical. Do we need to start moving away from multilateral negotiations to start applying and living Laudato Si values locally? And I'm sure everybody on this panel is going to say we need to do both, obviously. But is there a point in saying, is there a balance we need to strike, a better balance we need to strike between focusing on the global policy issues and actually local application and witness? Perhaps that's a good question for you, Bishop Martin.
That's a hospital pass, as someone says, yeah. Okay. Yeah, obviously, sorry, you've caught me there on the hop, as it were. I just reflect maybe back on on the previous question there, and that was about institutionalization of the whole effort. One of the things that I feel is that our Laudato Si working group, it's affiliated to our Episcopal Conference, and one of the things that needs to happen, and I just heard it there this morning, that in the Philippines, that the Laudato Si group is now a commission. So that's a way maybe of bringing something from the grassroots to the institution itself. What we want to avoid is institutionalizing, bringing something from the top down, because one of the strengths of the Laudato Si movement and what we're doing is that people are working from the ground up. So that's answering the previous question. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, in a sense that's right, isn't it? But it is the witness of the local and then holding leaders to account, and it's important to have that synergy. Do you want to come in?
I do, yes, please.
It'll come on, just speak into it. You fiddled with it.
I think I killed it. Is that right? I'm going to start juggling them. Should work. I do want to come in. I think the much overlooked chapter of Laudato Si is the last chapter, which is all about dialogue. And so I think if you just make it a binary choice between do you go to a conference in Belém or have a local conversation, it misses the point. We need to have the conversation at all levels. And we need to be persuasive in human terms, in terms that engage people and win the debate. So COP will only deliver if world leaders get on a plane committed to make it deliver. Because by the time they arrive, they've already decided what they're going to say. So you have to win it in your capitals. And political leaders will only deliver if the people they represent are telling them what they want. So we have to win the debate at every level, and we have to be much more savvy in how we engage. We need to know what the science is telling us, because that tells us the urgency, but we need people to move from the heart and not from the head. And so we need to be meek as lambs and cunning as wolves.
Brilliant, thank you. Just the last question now, I'm going to wrap two questions together. It's about the narrative. We heard very powerfully from Governor Schwarzenegger yesterday about the effect of using pollution rather than talking about the plight of the whales. In other words, speaking to people directly in their own concerns, developing a narrative. But there's another question about spirituality. How do we actually integrate spirituality into the if you like, the political moves that we're making with our political leaders, and indeed bringing in new perspectives possibly to COP30 itself, integrating spirituality. So narrative and spirituality. Priyanka, what do you want to...
Thank you very much for this question. I think it's absolutely timely and something that we definitely need to think about in approaching for COP30. But for me, when I see these issues aligned, looking at spirituality and faith, looking at our political leaders and our leaders in the climate justice movement, and even looking at the environmental issues like Governor mentioned, pollution, for me and my generation, this comes from our education systems, and it comes from what we learn at school in our school systems, because we often don't get this information in the home environment, and it's often not accessible. So how can we reimagine our school systems, our curriculums, to embrace these ideas, to embrace these conversations and these dialogues that allow us to think critically, think beyond what we see in our local communities, to engage with others from around the world, and to engage a one-on-one with our leaders and have these meaningful discussions so that they can learn from what we're facing and we can learn from their plans and have that discussion to be most meaningful. And with that, of course, aligning faith movements with it as well. And I know there's so many components that are going to go into this. So I think the hub for this is really our education systems, and it's transcendent across the world, allowing our school curriculums to reflect this. I think that's a great avenue and a great opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to draw this to a close now because it's been an enormously rich discussion, which has opened up, I think, great windows and doors for us for the next 2 days. It's slightly frustrating that we can't go more into these themes, but there are going to be many conversations happening today. I've certainly learned a lot from the panel today, and I've sensed that it is possible to bring urgency and hope together, to bring together, if you like, spirituality and politics, the local and the global, on which, by the way, chapter 6 of Fratelli Tutti, I think, remains a key text. So how we are people of integration in this movement. We want to integrate in order to build. And I've taken away huge inspiration. So to all the panelists, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience with us today. A round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that brilliant panel. So we are now going to go on break, but just a couple of announcements. For those of you here joining in person, we want to mention that we're going to start our working group sessions today. These have been designed to help connect you with new delegates and for new ideas to emerge from this conference. So please join a group with people you don't know. So there are sign-up sheets in the back of the room. So just go in the back and sign your name to a group, ideally with somebody that you don't know. And then if you still need a simultaneous translation device, you can pick one up downstairs right next to the stairs. All right, so enjoy, and we will return at 11:50. Thank you.